USAID memos detail human costs of cuts to foreign aid. The world is likely to see millions more malaria infections and 200,000 cases of paralytic polio each year, according to an agency whistleblower. The Trump administration's decision to withdraw foreign aid and dismantle the U.S. Agency for International Development is likely to cause enormous human suffering, according to estimates by the agency itself. Among them, up to 18 million additional cases of malaria per year, and as many as 166,000 additional deaths. 200,000 children paralyzed with polio annually, and hundreds of millions of infections. 1 million children not treated for severe acute malnutrition, which is often fatal, each year. More than 28,000 new cases of such infectious diseases as Ebola and Marburg every year. Those stark projections were laid out in a series of memos by Nicholas Enrich, acting assistant administrator for global health at USAID, which were obtained by the New York Times. Mr. Enrich was placed on administrative leave on Sunday. In one memo, he placed the blame for these potential health crises on political leadership at USAID, the Department of State and DOJ, who have created and continue to create intentional or unintentional obstacles that have wholly prevented implementation of aid programs. Those leaders have blocked payment systems, created new and ineffective processes for payments, and constantly shifted guidance regarding which activities qualify as life-saving, Mr. Enrich wrote. Another memo describes the slashing of the agency's global health workforce from 783 on January 20 to fewer than 70 on Sunday. In an interview, Mr. Enrich said he released the memos on Sunday afternoon, after an email arrived placing him on leave, to set the record straight on the gutting of USAID staff and the termination of thousands of life-saving grants. By detailing the series of events behind the scenes, he hoped it'll be clear that we were never actually given the opportunity to implement life-saving humanitarian assistance. Officials at the State Department did not immediately respond to a request for comment. In January, the Trump administration froze funds intended for foreign aid. On January 28, Secretary of State Marco Rubio issued a temporary waiver for life-saving humanitarian assistance. But very little money has actually been delivered, essentially shuttering aid programs worldwide and forcing hundreds of organizations to furlough or fire workers. Still, employees in USAID Bureau for Global Health tried to remain optimistic and to do everything we can to implement the waivers, Mr. Enrich said. But on Wednesday the Trump administration abruptly terminated some 5,800 projects financed by USAID, including many that had received waivers. It was finally clear that we were not going to be implementing under that waiver, Mr. Enrich said. I needed for myself and all the staff who had been pouring their hearts into doing this, we needed records to show what had happened, he said. Mr. Enrich said he had hoped to compile one more memo, showing the ways in which he and others had conveyed the risks of disrupting crucial programs to Mark Lloyd and Tim Meisberger, political appointees at the agency. But they repeatedly asked for more details to justify the programs, he said. It is clear the Trump administration is well aware that it is violating court orders and not delivering life-saving aid it claimed to be funding under a waiver, said Matthew Kavanaugh, director of the Georgetown University Center for Global Health Policy and Politics. Unless reversed, this will cost millions of lives, by the government's own accounting. Dr. Kavanaugh added. A single Ebola patient in New York in 2014 cost the city's health department $4.3 million in response measures. The outbreak in Uganda appeared to be ebbing, but a 4-year-old boy died earlier in the week, indicating that the virus was still circulating. The consequences may extend beyond human health, affecting U.S. businesses including agriculture and families by increasing health care costs, disrupting international trade and straining domestic resources. Programs for maternal and child health and for nutrition can stabilize the economy and political climate in other countries, the memo notes. By dismantling USAID and terminating its programs, the Trump administration is not only risking death for millions of the most marginalized around the world, but they are also triggering a constitutional crisis in the service of cruelty, Dr. Kavanaugh added.